Hi, I'm Beto, founder of Code with Beto and developer success engineer at Expo. Over the past few years, I've been helping thousands of developers from complete beginners to web coders take their first steps into mobile development with React Native. And now, with AI tools everywhere, we are seeing a new wave of vibe coders. People who can spin up an application with a prompt, but often hit a wall because they don't actually understand what the code does. So this video is here to fix that. I'll teach you how React Native really works step by step in plain English. We're going to start from zero, no AI, no complex setup, just you and me and the fundamentals. By the end, you'll understand what React Native is, how it works under the hood, and you'll build your first mobile application from scratch using Expo. We're gonna be creating a simple Pokédex app, but don't worry, this isn't just about Pokemon. It's about learning the core skills every React Native developer needs, like how to fetch data from an API, render a list of items, handle state, style components, and navigate between screens. The Pokédex is just our playground. The real goal is to help you think like a React Native developer. So whether you are a complete beginner or web developer who already knows React, or a vibe coder who wants to move beyond copy-paste AI code, this video is for you. You learn how mobile applications are built, why frameworks like React Native and Expo exist, and how JavaScript powers React Native performance. And if you enjoyed this and want to go deeper, learning how to publish your app, use push notifications, or handle advanced navigation patterns, check out my full React Native course at codewithbeto.dev. I'm gonna leave the link in the description. But for now, grab your phone, download Expo Go, and let's start from the very beginning. Just to reiterate, this video is for everyone who wants to get started in mobile development. If you already have experience with React and JavaScript, that's great, although that's not required to follow along with this video. As long as you can follow instructions, you should be able to complete this video and take it without any issues. The only thing you need is Expo Go in your phone and a computer. Now, before we dive into React Native, let's first understand how mobile applications are actually made. Every app you use, whether it's Instagram, Spotify, or your favorite game, runs on a mobile operating system. And there are really only two big companies that dominate the space: Apple and Google. Apple controls the iPhone and the iOS platform. Google controls Android, which runs in most non-Apple devices around the world. Together, these two companies basically shape the world we build for. Now, both Apple and Google have their own app stores. Apple has the App Store and Google has the Play Store. And here's something most beginners don't know. These companies actually want developers to publish more applications because that's how they make money. Every time you buy an application or make an in-app purchase, Apple or Google takes a cut, usually between 15 to 30%. And that's why they invest heavily in developer tools, new frameworks, and new features in their operating systems so developers can keep creating better apps that keep users engaged. So to make app developer easier, both companies, Apple and Google, have their own official frameworks. Apple offers SwiftUI for iOS applications. Google offers Jetpack Compose written in Kotlin for Android applications. And to be honest, these are incredible powerful tools, but they are completely separate ecosystems, meaning an app made for iOS won't automatically work on Android and vice versa. You might have seen these symbols. On the left we have Swift, and on the right we have Kotlin. Now at this point you might be thinking, should I learn Swift or Kotlin? That's a very common question, especially for new developers who want to make their first mobile application. Another big question developers ask: if I want my application to work on both iOS and Android, should I build and maintain two separate applications? And in theory you could, but that means writing everything twice. Two code bases, two sets of bugs, and two different release processes. It's expensive, time-consuming, and honestly kind of painful. So the answer is no. And that's the exact problem Meta, the company behind Facebook, ran into around 2013. They were maintaining two separate applications, one for iOS and one for Android. Every new feature had to be written twice, and every bug had to be fixed twice. It was slowing them down a lot, and engineers started wondering if there was a better way. So Meta engineers started asking themselves, what if we could use the web flexibility, things like JavaScript and React, but make it run inside a native application? That question led to the creation of React Native, a framework that combines the speed and flexibility of the web with the power and performance of native applications. And that's exactly what we're going to explore next. In 2015, Meta introduced React Native, and it completely changed how we build mobile apps. It combined React's component model, the one many web developers already knew, with the performance of native mobile apps. Suddenly, you could use one shared codebase to build beautiful, fast, and responsive applications for both iOS and Android. And today, it's also possible to build for web, Mac, and Windows using React Native. And the best part, Meta didn't keep it all for themselves. They open sourced React Native, letting the entire developer community use it, improve it, and help it evolve into what it is today. Since then, companies all around the world, from small startups to giants like Shopify, Tesla, have built applications with React Native. But how does it actually work? What makes it possible for JavaScript to run on a native application? So at a high-level overview, a React Native application has two main sides: the JavaScript side, shown here in yellow, and the native side, shown here in blue. On the JavaScript side, you write your React components, your logic, your UI, using the same React and JavaScript you already know. But JavaScript alone can't talk directly to the phone's native system. That's where something called JSI, or JavaScript interface, comes in. And it's this little white part in the middle of the React Native application. The JSI acts as the bridge between JavaScript and the native world. It translates what your React components describe. For example, render a button or show an image, and that gets translated to the specific platform native code. So the result is apps that look and perform just like your native applications, but powered by JavaScript. And because the JavaScript bundle is separate from the native code, you can even swap or update it on the fly. And that's what enables over-the-air updates, as long as the native part of your application is compatible with the JS bundle, you can swap it. This flexible architecture is what made React Native revolutionary. It gave web developers access to native power and companies the ability to move faster than ever. But as powerful as React Native is today, it doesn't include everything you need to ship a full application. So before we actually start using React Native, it's very important to understand what React Native itself actually provides and what it doesn't. React Native gives you the low-level APIs, things like native modules, debugger integration, and the bundler connection. You actually don't really need to touch these things when you are just starting, but they are the foundation of how React Native works. The challenge comes when you need to handle real-world application features like publishing, build management, over-the-air updates, navigation, routing, or access the sensors and things like the camera or push notifications. It's actually pretty overwhelming just to think about it. And React Native itself doesn't provide those out of the box. And realistically, 100% of the applications will need them. So developers are left to figure out all those integrations manually, unless we use a framework. And this isn't just my opinion, this is straight from Nicola Corti, who's part of the React Native core team. In his talk, Use Frameworks, he explains that the core teams focus on improving the low-level building blocks, while recommending that developers use React Native through a framework that provides the rest. Frameworks handle the boring stuff, so you can focus on building your application. And that brings us to Expo, the framework that gives React Native superpowers. So why Expo? Knowing the previous mentioned stuff about React Native and limitations, the answer becomes pretty clear. Expo is a full-stack framework that sits on top of React Native and provides everything you need for a smooth developer experience. It gives you a complete routing system with Expo Router, built-in support for over-the-air updates, native modules like camera, media libraries, sensors, notifications, you name it, and a whole ecosystem of tools that make React Native development simple and enjoyable. On top of that, Expo provides EAS, Expo Application Services, to handle builds, submissions, and updates for you. So you don't have to manage complicated native setup. And yes, Expo is open source, and it's the only framework officially recommended by Meta's React Native core team. I personally recommend Expo not because I work there, but because it just makes sense. You can inspect the code, use all the tools for free, and when your project grows, you can scale with Expo application services. The value you get from not reinventing the wheel is massive. So in short, Expo gives you everything React Native apps need, ready to go. And now I want to talk about a specific tool from Expo, which is Expo Go, because that's how we're gonna be running our application in this video. When you're learning React Native with Expo, you'll probably hear about Expo Go. So what is it? If we go back to what we learned earlier, a React Native application has two parts, the JavaScript side and the JavaScript bundle, right? This yellow and blue. So whenever you change something in the native side, you need to rebuild the application, which can take a while. But when you change something in the JavaScript bundle, you can see those changes instantly. That's called hot refresh. And it's one of the reasons React Native is so enjoyable to work with. Expo Go takes that idea to the next level. It's a free application that you can download from the App Store and Google Play, and it acts as a sandbox environment. It already includes most of the Expo native modules like camera, contacts, media library, sensors, notifications, you name it, so you can start building without compiling anything. You just scan a QR code from your terminal and your JavaScript code runs instantly inside Expo Go on your phone. This means you can test your application in seconds without setting up Xcode or Android Studio. And when you are ready to publish or need a deeper native access, you can create a development build using Expo application services, or you can even compile it on your computer. That's when your code gets fully compiled into a standalone application. We won't go into that in this video, but if you want to learn more about how to publish your application, I would highly recommend that you check my React Native course at codewithbeto.dev. We cover everything from the beginning, routing, all the way to publishing and even payments with in-app purchases. And I even added some bonus lessons like how to add an Apple widget to your app and how to upgrade your application. I also cover how to integrate Expo application services like build, submissions, updates, backend services, styling, components, you name it. I highly recommend that if you want to take the next step, check out my course. So for now, let's use Expo Go to develop fast, experiment freely, and see our application come to life right on your phone. Now you understand what Expo and Expo Go are, let's jump into coding and start building our first application. Before we can create our project, you're going to need to install something called Node.js. So if you just Google Node.js, should be the first result that you'll find. Node.js allows us to run JavaScript in our computer. So if you come here and just press get node, this is going to take you to this download page. So I recommend that you use the latest stable version, and you can know that it is the latest stable because it says LTS. And you can install it by running this command on your terminal, or if you want to keep things simple, just press this button depending on your machine. I'm using a Mac, so you can just download this and then double click it and install it. Okay. Now, if you don't know if you already have Node installed, you can open your terminal. So if you just search for terminal in your computer, it's going to pop up this application. It's called Terminal. If this is the first time that you are seeing it, don't worry, it's basically a window that allows you to run commands directly, to do things directly through this terminal. So for example, if you already have Node installed, you should be able to just type here node-v and hit enter. And this is going to return the version of Node that you are using. After installing Node, I would recommend that you run this command in your terminal just to make sure that you have it installed. In my case, I'm using 22 at the time that I'm recording this video, but it might be a new version when you are watching this video, and that's totally okay. By the way, the terminal, you don't need to install it. It comes by default on your computer and on Windows machine as well. Okay, so now that we know that we have Node installed, you can actually go to the docs.expo.dev website to get started. The way we create a new application is just by running this command, npx create expo app at latest. So let's copy. And now I'm going to navigate in my Finder to the place where I want to create my project. So here's my file explorer, and I want to create my application inside my desktop, and I have this folder called apps. So what we can do here is right click on this folder, and you'll find services at the very end. And then you can open a new terminal, add folder. Let's click this button. And this is basically going to open your terminal again. You can see that I'm in the apps folder, and this is because I want to create a project inside this folder. So I'm going to paste the command that we copied from Expo, npx create expo app add latest. And let's hit enter. Now this is asking me if I want to install the following package. I'm gonna say yes. You can say yes just by pressing the Y key and hit enter. Okay, and now it is asking me what is my app name. So I'm going to call it Pokédex and hit enter. Now this is going to download a template provided by Expo with all the code we need to run our application for the first time and start developing. Now I'm going to bring in my phone. There it is, as you can see. I can control it and you can see it on screen. And as you notice as well, I already installed Expo Go. So you can just go to the App Store, search for Expo Go, should be the first result. And this is how it looks. We're gonna need it in a moment. Now, if I go back to my terminal, you can see that the project has been initiated, right? And now we can cd into the folder. Basically, cd is a terminal command that we can use to navigate to this specific folder. Actually, you can just copy this and paste it right here, hit enter. And as you notice, now we are inside the Pokédex folder. Now, before we can actually open this folder, we need an IDE, and I'm gonna be using VSCode. In case you don't know what an IDE is, if you Google VSCode, it's going to be the first result, Visual Studio Code. It's an open source editor, code editor that you can use to edit your code. And I highly recommend that you use VSCode at least when you're getting started, because you know it's modern, open source, maintained by Microsoft, so it's the best of the best, and many engineers in the industry use VSCode. So just press the download button and then open VSCode. So I already have it installed, so I can just search for VSCode in my computer and open it. And this is how it looks when you open it for the first time. And you can see that we have some shortcuts. Like if I press Command O, by the way, I added my shortcuts. You can see them at the bottom right. If I do that, this is going to open the file explorer. And from here, I can go to the desktop inside my apps folder and select Pokédex and then press open. And this is going to open my project, my new Expo app. It's here. And on the left, I have the code that makes my application a React Native Expo app. This is a template that we created when we ran the command. So at this point, I'm going to run my application using Expo Go. Let's open a terminal window. You can toggle a terminal by running this shortcut that you can see here, or you can also press Command J on Mac and this will open the terminal. But if you're not able to open the terminal, you can always go to the toolbar and select New Terminal. And this is going to open a terminal for you. I'm going to close this one. I already have the other one. Now we are ready to run our application. The way we can run the application is by running a command here. I'm going to say npx expo start. This is going to start the server. Okay. And here it is. This is the QR code I was talking about. The server is running, and now we can scan this QR code to load the JavaScript part of this application into Expo Go. So I'm going to bring my device. I'm going to open the camera and let's scan this QR code. Open in Expo Go. And notice that something is going to happen here. It says iOS bundled, meaning that we are now running our application in our device. You can see there on screen. So from here, I can use it. It comes with many things like tabs. It already comes with navigation and many cool stuff that it's actually pretty advanced for beginners like us. So what I want to do here, it's run a script to simplify this project. Now, by default, if you take a look on the left, the template comes with a script called reset project. Now I'm going to close the terminal. I'm going to be using the shortcut Command J to close it. Okay, and toggle it. That's super fast, so I'm going to be doing that. Now, if I press Command P, I can search for files. I'm going to search for a file very important when working with React Native applications, that is the package JSON. This is how it looks. And you can see that we have some scripts right away here. The template comes with something called reset project. We can run these scripts by telling the terminal to do that. So let's open the terminal. Now I'm going to stop the server by pressing Ctrl+C. Okay, this is going to stop the server. And we can always run clear to clear the terminal. And now let's run this command, reset project. You can copy this if you want. And in my terminal, I'm going to run npm run and then paste reset project. Hit enter. This is going to run the script and it's basically asking me if I want to move the existing code into another folder. And I'm gonna say no. Usually when you are interacting with your terminal, you always have these yes and no options. So I'm gonna press N, hit enter. And this is going to simplify the code on the left. So if you take a look inside the app folder, this is where our application lives. It's now just a couple files, a layout and an index file. Okay, so let's start the server again. Let's say npx expo start, or you can also use npm. Once you install Node, you get access to npm. So because we installed Node, remember, I have Node, I can say npm run, and then you pass the script that you want to run. In this case, start. So if I hit enter, this is going to start the server. Okay, now let's go back to my phone. I can shake my phone and this should bring the developer tools that live inside Expo Go. And you can do many things here like reload, which is what I want to do at the moment because I restarted the server. So I'm going to press reload. Okay, and now the app has changed. Now we only have live mode at this moment. And yeah, nothing else, just a text, which is what we wanted, right? You can always shake again the device to bring the dev tools. You can press go home and see the servers that you have running. In this case, we're running this Pokédex project. And yeah, so we are good to start working on the JavaScript code here in our project. Now, let's inspect the application. Most of the code and logic that we're going to be writing is going to live inside the app folder. And in the app folder, we have the entry point of the application that lives in this layout. This layout is defining a stack of screens, basically, right? And in this stack of screens, this actually comes from Expo Router, which is the official Expo routing system. And this allows us to navigate between screens and define stack screens. Like in this case, we are defining a stack. But at this time, we only have this self-closing tag. We don't have any complicated at the moment, which means that if we don't define anything, by default, we are going to use this index file as the entry point of our application. So if I click on this index, you can see that we have some code. A couple things that are coming from React Native, which are the basic components, text and views. And we're going to be using these a lot, okay? So in here, let's update the text. I'm going to delete this and say Pokédex and say Command S to save the file. And once you save the file, you should be able to see your application update on the right. Okay, that's awesome. At this point, we are developing a React Native application that not only works on iOS, but also on Android. So let's start writing, let's start developing our Pokédex application. And to do that, I actually went ahead and searched for a little bit of inspiration in Dribble. I searched for a Pokédex app and I came across this one right here that looks pretty cool. It's, a very simple app that shows a list of Pokemon. Now you might be wondering, where the heck are we getting the data for Pokemons? There is actually an API called pokeapi.co, and it's a free REST API that we can use to fetch Pokemon data. This might look a bit complicated at the moment, but it's actually very easy to use. And when you are developing applications, you're going to be interacting with APIs a lot of the time. This is how an API looks like. Let me zoom in a little bit here. This is something called base URL. And then we have a path. So in this case, this is an example that is saying, try it now. You can just pass the Pokemon path and then the name of the Pokemon that you want to fetch. So in this case, Ditto. And the result for this API call is going to be something like this, which comes with a bunch of data that we can use. So let's try changing this to be Pikachu. Hit enter. And we get a result as well, which is information about Pikachu, the ability, price, forms, Pikachu, height, name, moves, past abilities, and a bunch of information about Pokemons. You can actually use IDs, I think. So if we just say number 1 and hit enter, this will also return a result. Like in this case, Bulbasaur is the Pokemon number 1. So knowing that, we can start fetching Pokemons. Now digging into the docs of the API, this is actually pretty common as well. You might need to read the documentation about the API that you are going to be implementing in your application. So if you are working for a company, they are going to provide you the information. But if you are working on a side project, like in this case, it's a good idea to just give a quick read to the docs. So if I go to this point, you can see that we can also pass some query parameters in the request. So for example, we can pass a limit of 20 Pokemons, and then you can also use an offset. But we don't actually want to do offset at the moment. I'm just going to copy this part of this endpoint, and let's copy this, open a new window, and paste this in here. And as you notice, this is going to give me a bunch of data. Now, if we take a look at this data, of course, this is hard to read, but this is fetching only abilities, right? Because we are hitting this endpoint. So if I go back to the URL and instead of fetching ability, I'm going to fetch Pokemon and limit to 20 as well, hit enter. And this is going to bring me a list of 20 Pokemons, okay? So now with this endpoint, let's copy it. And let's go back to our application and let's start fetching Pokemons and let's put them on screen. So to do that, if you know React, you already know what to do here. We're going to be using a use effect. But if you don't know React, don't worry. We're going to be using some hooks from React to fetch data. So initially, when I load this application for the first time, I want to do the fetch request to get the Pokemon's data. So when you want to do something like that, when the component mounts or the screen mounts, you can use the hook useEffect from React. And this is the advantage of using VSCode. When you type something like this, it's going to get auto-imported if you hit enter, or otherwise you can type this manually to import it from React. So we're going to be using two hooks, useEffect and useState. UseEffect allows us to run code when the screen mounts, and then useState allows us to save the data in a state variable that we can then display on screen. So let me show you how this looks. UseEffect takes a callback function as the first parameter, and the second parameter is going to be an array of dependencies. This is going to be empty for now because I just want to run this useEffect once when the component mounts. But if you want to run the logic inside this useEffect more than once, you can specify some variables that will trigger the effect. Cool. So inside this useEffect, I want to fetch Pokemons. So to do that, let's create a function, an async function called fetch Pokemons, right? We can pass some parameters, but I'm not going to be passing anything. Now inside this, I'm going to have a try catch. By the way, this is just plain JavaScript, and if you have some questions about it, you can investigate more about functions in JavaScript or TypeScript. But yeah, if we have an error, I'm going to put it in the console by saying console log error. Otherwise, I'm going to continue with the logic here. When you want to do a fetch request in React Native, you can use the fetch function. So I'm gonna say const response equal to await fetch. Fetch is a function that allows us to hit an API, and it's going to take a URL as parameter and then some request info. Since this is a simple GET request, we can just pass the endpoint like this. This is my endpoint, right? And just like that, this should actually return a response. So once we get the response, it's actually going to come in a JSON format. So we can abstract the data by saying await response.json. And then let's just put this in the console by saying console log data and hit save. Okay, now we are actually not using this function yet. So let's copy the name and paste it inside the use effect. And now what we are doing here is that as soon as I press save, this use effect is going to run, and we should run this logic and put data in the console. So let's open the terminal. This is a console. I'm going to make this a bit smaller, and let's press Command S. All right, and we get some data in here. It's basically the same thing that we got when we paste the link directly in the browser, but now this is inside our application. So once we have this data, I want to save it in my state variable. So instead of putting it in the console, we can call this function set Pokémons, right? And I actually haven't created this function. To do that, now we can use the useState hook. Let's call useState. This is coming from React, and useState allows us to create variables. So I'm gonna say const Pokémons and set Pokémons. One of these is the actual value of the variable, and the other one is a setter function. We can call this set function when we want to update the value of this variable. So at the beginning, this is going to be an empty array. But when we call set Pokémons, we're going to replace that with the data that we're getting here, which is a list of Pokémons, right? Then once we save the data, we can use this variable to list the data. So inside my view, instead of having a regular view, I'm going to have something called a scroll view. And we can use scroll views directly from React Native. I'm importing it here. And then inside the scroll view, I can iterate over the list of Pokémons. So if I open curly braces, that means that I'm going to be writing some JavaScript inside this tag, and I'm going to say Pokémons dot, this is an array, so I'm going to say dot map, and we can iterate for each Pokémon. And for each Pokémon, I'm going to return a view from React Native. And then for each view, I'm going to return a text. And inside the text, I can have the Pokémon name, for example, right? So if we take a look at the items that we are getting here, each item has a name field. So we can say something like Pokemon.name. Okay. Now, when we're iterating on items, we need to pass a key. So let's pass the Pokemon dot. We can use the name or the URL. I'm gonna use the name for the key. Okay, so let's hit save. Let's see if something happens. Okay, and the application broke basically. And the reason for that is because if you pay attention, the response that we're putting in the console here comes with the count next. And then after that comes with something called results. So we need to set data dot results. And this is actually a list, right? And this is the list that we want to iterate. So if I hit save, now we are setting the list and we are iterating on each of them and put them here, right? So this is how it looks. Of course, now TypeScript is yelling at me because we don't have any type safety for this Pokemon. So what we can do is we can create a type for these Pokemons. So let's take one of the results and let's put it in here at the very top of my file. This is how each item looks like. And if we want to type this, we can say something like interface, Pokemon, and then define the type. Name is going to be of type string. URL is going to be of type string as well. Okay. And then in here, I can let useState know that this is going to be of type Pokemon. Now this is yelling at me again because this is being initialized as a list, not as a Pokemon. Let me delete this. So we can just simply say, okay, you know what? This is going to be a list of Pokemons. And now because we know the type and we know that each item has a name and a URL, TypeScript is going to be happy. So if I hit save, everything is going to still work, but now we have type safety. And when I do things like dot, because now we know the type, we can see here intelligence from the IDE, from VSCode, and it's showing me the properties of this Pokemon, like the name. Okay, so as you might imagine by now, each Pokemon comes with their URL, right? So we can use that URL to make a new fetch request and get more info about that specific Pokemon. And then we can also allow the user to select how many Pokemons they want to bring. For example, instead of hard coding these 20 here, we can just have 5, or we can change this to be 10 and hit save. Now we get 10 results. Now, I actually want to have the image of the Pokemon so that we can render it, right? And it's going to look cool. So to do that, we can actually iterate for each one of these and then create a new fetch request to get more info about that specific Pokemon using the URL. So to do that, I'm going to paste a little bit of code here and then I'm going to explain it to you. We are going to create multiple promises or multiple fetch requests, right? So we can use this promise.all and then pass the promises that we want to resolve or the fetch request, right? And we are just iterating over each result. And then for each one of these results, we are going to, let me type this with the Pokemon type. We're going to do the fetch request, very similar to what we did here, passing the Pokemon URL for each one of the results. And then we are going to grab the details, right? So if you just use the link, for example, let's just take this as an example, the first result. Let's go to Safari. Let's paste this in here. If I access directly Pokemon number 1, this is going to bring actually a bunch of information about the Pokemon. So this is a lot of data actually, but we are just worrying about the, we're just worrying about the image. So in here, I'm accessing the details dot front default, which is the main sprite of the Pokemon, right? So we are saving this into an array of detailed Pokemons, and then we can change this. Instead of saving the main data, we are going to save the detailed Pokemon, which contains the image, right? But now this is name and image. So I'm going to update, instead of having URL, I'm going to have name and image, right? And now because I updated that, this is actually not going to work anymore. So I'm going to type this as any for now. But down here, if I, add another text, let's duplicate the text, I can now access the image. So if I hit save, this is going to now fetch the Pokemon. Okay, and we can see it on screen. Now we have the link of the image. So instead of rendering a text, we can render an image, and we can use an image from React Native, like this. This was imported automatically. Let me show you. It's in here. It's coming from React Native. So React Native is providing all these components that we can use to render our application. At the end of the day, these views are being translated to native views for the user, depending on the platform, right? iOS or Android. So image takes some properties, and you can actually learn more about these components just by pressing Control Space. And then this is going to bring all these things that you can use from this component. There are many things, and I would recommend that you check out the documentation for each specific component that you want to use. You can search, React Native.dev and check the documentation to learn more about how to use a specific component. So this is going to take a source, and for the source we can pass a URI, and the URI is going to be the Pokémon image. Now, an image in React Native needs to have a width and height. So let's pass an inline style, and an inline style can be written as follows. It's an object like this, and we can pass width of 100 and height of 800. Let's hit save. Let's see what happens. Awesome. Now we have a list of Pokemon, and because this is a scroll view, I can, swipe my finger and navigate through Pokemons and, learn more about them. Now, at this point, I'm actually limiting myself to only the image, right? And the name. But you might want to get more information about the Pokemon. So if you need more information about the Pokemon, you can go to the docs. So here I selected the Pokémon API, and this is the endpoint that we are hitting. Pokemon, then the ID or name, you can pass it here. And this is all the info that comes here. And right now we are grabbing the sprites and then front default. So if you pay attention in the response, we have sprites, and we have actually many images. So let's say that you also want to show maybe the shiny version of the Pokemon. You can, take advantage of it. You can just access this value. We also have the back default. So let's just, for fun, copy this value. Let's go back and let's say image back, and we can say details dot sprites dot back default. Okay, now we are grabbing this value. We can hit save. Let's update our type to have the image back. So I'm going to duplicate this. Let's say image back. Awesome. Now we can simply duplicate our image. Let's copy, paste down here, and let's use the image back. Command S to save. And if we take a look at the phone, now we get the back image, front and back. Pretty cool. Awesome. So we can actually make this bigger so that everyone can see. Let's do 150 and 150 width and height. Let's do the same for this one. 150 and 150, hit save. There we go. Now I want to put my images from left to right. So we can do things like wrapping these two views inside another view. This is how it looks. Now hit save. Nothing happens so far, but now I can add a style to this view. We can add inline styles like this, the same way that we created, the style for this image. And then we can use the flex box, like for example, flex direction row. Hit save. This is going to put items from left to right. You can, of course, change this, for example, row reverse. You pay attention on the right, we have, the front first, but if I hit save now, this is going to now do it in reverse mode. Might be useful if you need, but yeah, let's just use row for now. Okay, cool. Pretty cool. So now let's actually take a look at the design that we were looking before. And you know what? Funny thing is that these Pokemons have a different background depending on their type, right? So Charmander, for example, fire type is orange. And then we have, Bulbasaur green. We have a red one down here. Would be cool if we can graph the type of the Pokemon. So we can actually, access the types. It's an array of types. So let's try to graph that. This is actually a bit more complex, But we know that in the details, we have the types, and this is going to be an array. So we can say details dot types. Let's go back. Types, oops. Types is a list of items. So this is an array, and each item has a property type, then name and URL, because you can get more info about the type. Let's go back. And now let's define a new type. I'm gonna say interface Pokemon type. This is going to look something like this. I don't care about the slots. And then I'm going to name the field type here. And then we're going to have name of type string, and then URL. We are actually not going to use the URL, but it's good to have it here, right? So now I can define here my type, and I'm going to say that this is going to have types, and this is going to be a list of Pokemon type. This is how you can start creating more complex types like this one. Cool. So now let's actually set this data down here just by saying details types. Okay, I think we're already doing it here. Cool. So if now we put this in the console, we can say something like console log Pokemons, hit save, and let's take a look at the terminal. Okay, we have a bunch of data. It's actually hard to see. So we can maybe just grab the Pokemon at position 0 on the list. Okay, now it looks a bit better. But now what I'm gonna do is use JSON.stringify to format this output in the terminal like this. So if I hit save now, just by using this syntax, now this looks way better. So I can see that a Pokemon comes with types, and the first type of Bulbasaur is grass, which is correct, right? So now I should be able to, apart from the name, we can maybe duplicate this. We can say Pokemon types. Now this is yelling at me because this is an array. So we can grab the position 0 dot type dot name. Let's hit save. Awesome. So if I hit save, now you can see that it says grass. And let me actually make the style of this a bit bigger. What I'm going to do here is show you another way of styling stuff. React Native comes with something called StyleSheet, and you can import it like this. You can create styles in line like we've been doing it here, or you can do it outside of the component to keep things simple and easy to read. So down here, I'm going to create a variable called styles equal to StyleSheet from React Native dot create. This takes an object of styles, and then you can start defining your styles. For example, I'm going to define one for name, and then this is going to take an object. Then we can start writing the style, like font size. I'm going to use 20. And we can define font weight, for example. We can use both. Usually you're going to be using strings and numbers for the values. And this is very similar to CSS. So if you are familiar with CSS, just keep in mind that this is like in a JSON or JavaScript object notation. Cool. So now we can use this style for the name text. So I'm going to say style equal to, now instead of passing the object directly here, I'm going to say styles dot name and hit save. So now my name is bigger. Great. Now let's make this actually 32 maybe. It's gonna be too big, right? Let's make it 28. And then we can duplicate this. And then we can say type. Type could be 20, bold as well, and then maybe we can use color gray. Now let's go here on the type name, and I'm gonna say styles.type and hit save. This is how you can keep the styles a bit cleaner by putting them outside of the component and just using this style here. Okay, so we have the type fire, water, bug. So based on the type, we could define some colors that we want to use. Let's try to create a map for that. So we could create an object that is going to return the color that we should use based on the type. So let's call this one colors by type. And this is an object. Put it in here. Now let me scroll up. Cool. Let's start with grass. Grass, we're going to use green. Then we have fire. So fire, we're going to use red or maybe orange. Then what else? We have water. We're going to be using blue. And then bug. Yeah, let's use green. Cool. Awesome. So now we can use this object to define the color of our background based on the type. So if we go to the list, we are iterating here. And let's pass a style to this view. I'm going to add this style in line. The reason for that is because I'm going to be changing some stuff based on the current type of the Pokemon. So let's add a background color. I'm going to use red for now. Hit save. That's how it looks. Of course, everything is together, you know, everything is close to everything. So that's why everything is red at the moment. But if I go to the scroll view takes a property called content container style. And in here we can pass a style. So we can add a gap or space between items. And I'm going to say 16. And now you can see the separation between items. Cool. We can also add a padding of 16. All right. Okay, let's go back to the list of Pokemon, and instead of using background color red, I'm going to use my object that we created here, colors by type. So I want to use colors by type, add position, so we can position ourselves based on the Pokemon type. So let's grab this and put it in here. So let's see what happens if I press save. Okay, we get a warning, but still works. We're using green, Charmander orange, Squirtle blue, and Caterpie green. Awesome. So we have a little warning here from TypeScript. And just to keep things simple, I'm going to say TS ignore, because we're going to be just limiting ourselves to this list of Pokemon. So I know that we are not going to have any issues. So we can just ignore this line by saying TS ignore like this. Okay, and everything works fine, but actually I don't really like the colors. They are very ugly. Okay, so I asked ChatGPT to generate some colors and it gave me this. Okay, so let's hit save. Now it looks way better. Awesome. I really like it. Yeah, and you know, ChatGPT also generated more info, which is great in case we need more types. And if we really want to, if we go to the background color, we can say plus 30 to add some opacity, right? We can say 50% of opacity. And what this is translating, it's basically like adding the opacity here by passing it directly, or you can concatenate this here. So plus 50 actually looks a bit more like the design that we're trying to follow here. Pretty cool. Okay, so yeah, let's use maybe 50 for now. And now let's keep styling this. I'm going to come here and say padding. Let's add a padding of 20, for example. Let's see how it looks. Okay, so let's just try to center the text here. So the name and type, we can just come here and say text align to the center and do the same here. So if I hit save, it's now centered. Perfect. Let's now add a simple border radius of 20 as well. Okay, and that looks way better. Perfect. Now, what if we want to actually render more information based on what we have here, right? Because the user could press the card and maybe we can navigate to a details screen for each Pokemon. So that's actually a pretty common pattern that you're going to be using a lot as a React Native developer. So let's see how we can do that. First of all, we need to create a new screen. So on the left, I'm going to say new file, and let's create a new screen. So with Expo Router, just by creating a new file inside the app folder, we are automatically adding a new screen. So we actually don't need to do anything else unless we want to customize things, and we actually want to do that. So let's start by creating this file. We can name it as you want. So I'm going to call this one details.tsx. You could also name it like Pokemon details and stuff like that. Now, don't complicate this a lot, I'm going to copy whatever we have on the index file. So Command C, let's go to the details, Command B, and we are gonna reutilize a bunch of stuff. So first of all, we are not going to need this, so let's remove the colors and all that. I'm going to remove basically everything, the use effects and the fetch request. And let's just keep a simple scroll view, and let's remove as well the Pokemons. So this is how it looks. Now I'm going to rename this component to be details and hit save. Okay, now we don't have anything here, which is great. Now we want to navigate to this screen. So I'm going to actually remove the styles as well. Cool, awesome. Now how we can navigate to this screen when we press one of these things. So in React Native, there's something called pressable that you can use to trigger events or actions when the user presses something. So we can wrap the view in a pressable like this, but now it's yelling at me because the key value should be in the parent here. So let's paste this in here. Now the warning is gone. Now we have this pressable, and this pressable takes properties like on press. So what do we want to do when we press this button? We want to navigate. We can use this pressable, or we can actually use a link from Expo Router. This link is coming from Expo Router. You remember the navigation system that we're using. And now this is actually yelling at me because this takes an href. And if I just open quotes here, you're going to find our details screen. Okay, so if I do that, and let's just change this to be a link, hit save. If I do that, the style changed a little bit, as you can see. But if I press one of these items, we navigate to the details screen. No matter what we're pressing, we are navigating. Okay, pretty cool. So based on that, what I want to do now is actually fix my style. First of all, we can cut this style, put it in here, hit save. Now, something that is actually bothering me before we implement the details screen is that it says index, right? Our screen instead of home or instead of Pokemons. So what we can do is just go to the root layout, which is where we can define our screens. And I'm going to create this tag like this. And then we can define each specific screen in here by saying stack.screen. We can pass the name of the route, in this case, index. And then we can define some options for this screen. For example, the title. In this case, I'm going to use home. If I hit save, now it says home. Awesome. So when we press an item, we're navigating to the details screen. So let's customize the details screen here. Let's name details. The name needs to match the name of the file, by the way, the file that we have on the left. And title for this is going to be details. Hit save. There we go. Now the left button says home, and I actually don't really like that. I want to keep it minimal, we can access the header back title display mode. This is a property and we can use minimal to just keep it simple with a back arrow like this one. Okay, and it's using liquid glass, by the way, which is, fully native for iOS. Okay, so when we navigate to this screen, we need to actually get information about what we need to display. This is also known as a dynamic route, and we can pass parameters when we navigate to this route using the link. So the link can take this link just like that, like the string, or we can actually pass an object with the path name, which is what we have, but then we can also pass some parameters to the other screen. So I'm going to pass the Pokemon name as parameters. Now this is yelling at me because this should actually be an object. Let's pass the name to be Pokemon name. Awesome. So now we know that we are passing the name of the Pokemon that we are pressing when we navigate. So if we go back here, we can use a hook from Expo Router. It's called use search params, local search params. I'm going to bring this from Expo Router, and this will give me the params like this. We can just grab them like that. Maybe let's put them in the console. Params like this. So let's hit save. Let's hit save here. Let's open the console. I'm going to press C in the console to clear everything. And now let's try to navigate. I'm going to go back. Let's navigate to Bulbasaur and I get the name. Okay, let's go back. I get the name, Charmander. Nice, cool, it's working. So this is how you can pass parameters from route to route. So from here, we can just say .name. And if I navigate, now we get the string. Okay, cool. So with that, we can actually do another fetch request to get more information about the Pokemon. And, it's a matter of basically re-implementing this again. We could actually pass directly the Pokemon URL. So I guess it depends on what you want to do at this point. But I think this is actually a very good opportunity for you to try to implement a fetch request here based on the name of the Pokemon. So just to give you a nice start, you're gonna need a use effect that needs to run when we navigate to this screen. You're gonna need a function to fetch the Pokemon data. Async function, fetch Pokemon by name. You can pass the name as parameter if you want of type string. You're gonna need a try catch, and then you're gonna need a fetch request here. Okay, so this is a good exercise if you're following along. Try to do this by yourself without using ChatGPT. And if you need to know more about how to use fetch, you can actually search the documentation and read about it. That is going to benefit you a lot. And then you can display the info down here and style it. Okay, now just before we end this video, guys, because I don't want to make it super long, I want to show you a couple more things that you can do with Expo Router in the layout. For example, you can define the presentation animation of this screen, and you can use a modal, which looks really nice. So for example, if I now press one Pokemon, the screen gets presented as modal. You can also use form sheet. And if I just use form sheet like that, this is going to look very similar to a modal screen, but the difference is that form sheet, you can define some detents. So I'm gonna say sheet allow detents, and let's say that I want to just allow 0.5% of the screen. Let's see what happens. Now the form sheet takes only 50% of the screen. Okay, and from here, I can close it, open it. Pretty cool. You can also define some detents like 0.5, then 0.7, and then let's change this to be 0.3, Now let's see what happens. 0.3, and then you can play between 0.5 and 0.7 just by swapping your finger. Pretty cool. You can do things like sheets. If you just type sheet, you'll get all these properties like grabbable, visible, equal to true. This is, just this little top grabbable item that lets a user know that they can drag it. So it's pretty cool. You can always hide the header, like header shown equal to false, and just keep it simple like that. And then, of course, you can overwrite these properties by going to the actual detail screen and use the stack from Expo Router screen. And then you can set options here directly. So header shown equal to true. And then let's wrap this into a tag so that we don't get that error. And yeah, let's try this again. Of course, because I set this to false here, this won't work. But you can override, for example, the title, right? This is something that will be useful. Let's type test. Now we have test. But dynamically, you can do something like just grab the params.name, right? Params.name. Hit save. Let me say as string so that we don't get that warning. And then let's see what happens for each Pokemon. Now, dynamically, we are setting the title of the form sheet, which is pretty cool. Let's see Blastoise. Let's see Squirtle. Okay, you can do things like that with the background color here. You can say background color, I don't know, red, just for testing. Yeah, and at the moment it's not taking the entire space available because we don't have anything inside the scroll view. But you can add a simple text with the params.name. And let's bring the text from React Native. And let's duplicate this a couple times just so that we have some content to show. And this is how it looks. Okay, so you can do things like this. Of course, this is, not necessary at the moment. Now let's test restarting the application, for example. I'm going to shake and refresh. And the fetch request gets triggered and we get the list of Pokemons. We can navigate to each one of them and we remove this background color red. All right, so I think this is a good point to stop. This is more than enough and we have learned a bunch of things in this video. Although the application is very simple, but we learned how to fetch data, how to move between screens, how to define new screens, how to change the settings of the screen, different presentations, how to pass parameters to different routes, how to get the parameters using Expo Router hooks, how to use useEffect, how to use useState to get data, how to read and learn about APIs, how to style the components, the cards, some of the basic components that you can use from React Native like scroll view, text, views, buttons, pressable, links from Expo Router, and many more things. So if you want to take things to the next level, check out codewithbeto.dev. In the course, of course, we take you from zero to hero all the way to publishing together, step by step. So I hope you liked this video. I hope you learned something new. I hope you find it helpful. Please let me know in the comments if you want me to create more videos like this, or if I missed something, if you want me to create a specific video about something that you like to reinforce. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.